The sky above Velkar Prime never turned dark. It was always glowing, always humming. Lights from 1,000 towers painted the clouds in shifting colors: violet, green, a blue so deep it looked like liquid shadow. From the street level, the stars were nothing more than a rumor. Here, light never left you alone. Neon signs flickered in languages Evan Dre couldn't read. Advertisements pulsed across glass walls, offering everything from cybernetic pets to dream-infused liquor. It was beautiful, and it stank. Evan walked with his head low, the collar of his oil-stained jacket pulled high against the synthetic rain that didn't fall from clouds, but from cooling units lining the rooftops. Around him, the crowds moved like water through a cracked pipe. Aliens of every shape and shimmer passed without looking twice. Some floated, some crawled, some looked human, but weren't. He didn't belong here. He was just a mechanic, earthborn, broke, human. In Velkar Prime, that meant invisible. He fixed pipes, replaced fuel lines, spent his nights hunched over rusted shuttle cores in hangars that smelled like acid and regret. What little he earned, he sent back home. What was left of it? A crumbling city under a dying sky, and a sister hooked to a hospital bed with failing lungs. He didn't have enough for her treatment. Not anymore. The rich here lived in towers, the rest of them in the gutters below. And tonight, he should have gone straight home, but something tugged at him. It started with a detour, a shortcut through the lower alleys behind Sector 9, a place he normally avoided. Too quiet, too clean, the kind of silence that meant someone had bought privacy with blood. He was halfway through when he saw her. She stepped out from the shadows as if the alley had made her, tall, wrapped in a cloak that shimmered like liquid silver. Her face was hidden, but her presence wasn't. She didn't move like a local. She moved like someone who expected gravity to get out of her way. "You are Evan Dre," she said. He froze. "Who's asking?" he said, taking a step back. "I am Vera of the 5th House of Serene." He blinked. "Never heard of it. But I have heard of you." That stopped him. The voice was calm, musical, not mechanical, but not quite organic either. She stepped closer, and something in the shadows behind her shifted. A ripple in the air, like reality holding its breath. "You fix broken ships. You send credits to a clinic on Earth. For a girl named Marin." His chest tightened. "How do you know that?" Vera tilted her head slightly. "I make it my business to know valuable things." "I'm not valuable," he muttered. "You are. To me." A strange silence fell between them. The alley seemed to narrow. The city sounds behind him faded. Her next words came like a whisper from some old myth. "I want to buy your nectar." He stared. "My what?" "Your nectar," she repeated. "The inner compound your body produces under stress, emotion, desire. It is rare, pure, and highly sought after by my kind." "You mean blood?" "More than blood," she said. "It is the resonance of feeling, pain, longing, hope. It lives in your cells, and it is beautiful." He took another step back. "That's insane." But she didn't argue. She simply raised her hand and opened a small crystal cube. Inside, numbers spun. Credits. Too many zeros to count. Evan stared. "That's more than I'd earn in 10 years. "1 session," she said softly. "No pain, no harm, monitored, safe." He hesitated. No one ever looked at a human like this. Not here. Not unless they were about to be arrested or discarded. No one cared what lived inside him. Until now. He thought of Marin. Her oxygen supply was being rationed again. "Why me?" he asked. Vera's voice was smooth. "An old med freighter job. You were tested without knowing. You carry a rare marker. Your nectar is unusually strong." He rubbed his face. "So I lie in a bed while machines suck feelings out of me." "Yes." He looked at the cube again. The credits swirled like a miniature galaxy. "Why do rich aliens want this?" Her voice dropped. "Because it makes them feel, and they have forgotten how." Evan said nothing. Then, slowly, he reached out and took the cube. "I'll try one session," he said. Vera turned, her cloak sweeping behind her like mist. "You begin tomorrow." She disappeared into the dark. That night, Evan couldn't sleep. He stared at the cube on his table. He wasn't proud, but pride didn't keep his sister breathing. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a voice whispered, "What if this is the only thing you're worth in this galaxy?" The shuttle rose so silently, it made the city feel fake beneath it. Velkar Prime shrank away, its glittering towers no more real than a child's drawing, once the clouds swallowed them whole. Evan sat still, his hands in his lap, the gold credit chip tucked deep in his sleeve like a sin he had not yet admitted. No one spoke during the flight. The attendants were too perfect to be real. Skin like polished pearl, eyes like unfinished mirrors, dressed in robes so white they seemed made of light itself. They did not look at him. He was not a person. He was cargo, a rare harvest, a living contract. The ship docked into something high above the smog lines, a structure that had no name, just smooth curves and quiet docking clamps. No signage, no windows, just corridors that hummed like breath held too long. The room they led him to was round, no corners, no dust. The light came from everywhere and nowhere. It felt less like a chamber and more like standing inside someone else's memory, a memory too clean to be true. He was told to change. The robe was thin, silk-like, silver blue. It clung to him, not for modesty, but to display. He felt it immediately. He was not here to be treated. He was here to be revealed. Vera entered. This time she wore black. Her face was visible now. Sharp lines, pale like frost, eyes so violet they seemed to glow without light. She walked toward him slowly, like every step had been rehearsed 1,000 years ago. "You are calm," she said. "I am not calm," Evan replied. "I am very aware of what this is, and it feels wrong." "That is natural," she said, without flinching. "Your body is entering readiness. It heightens emotional response. The nectar will rise faster." "I want to know exactly what you're taking from me," he said. She stepped close. Her hand lifted and gently placed a silver disc against the center of his chest. It latched there with a soft hum. "This," she said, "reads your nervous system. It collects the liquid your body releases when emotion peaks. We call it nectar, but it is more than that. It is memory, feeling, the unfiltered truth of your experience." He frowned. "And what if I want to stop?" "You say the word," she said simply, "and it ends. There is no force, only permission." Evan hesitated, then nodded. The lights dimmed. The floor shifted slightly beneath his bare feet. The hum grew deeper. He heard a tone, low, not loud, but so deep it echoed in his ribs. The air changed. It smelled like home. Not any real home, but the idea of it. Rain, warm soup, the dusty blanket Marin used to curl into. He closed his eyes, and it all began. Flashes. The first time he held Marin's hand, when she was hooked to machines. The night he left Earth. The dream he had, where he could still hear his mother's voice. The realization that he was truly alone up here. No help coming. No miracle left. He did not cry, but he felt it. All of it. And that was enough. The disc pulsed. The machine whispered. A tube lit up beside him. Clear fluid flowed, drop by drop. The attendants moved around him without speaking. One watched the readings. Another took notes. Another placed a glass panel between Evan and the rest of the room, as if to frame him like a painting. "I feel strange," Evan said, his voice quiet but shaking. "That is your truth rising," Vera said. He looked at her. "Why would anyone want this?" "Because it is real," she said softly. "Because they are not." The pulse slowed. The scent faded. The platform beneath him stopped shifting. The lights returned. Evan sat still, not broken, not whole, just full. "That's it?" he asked. She nodded. "Your first session is complete." She handed him a cloth, a drink. He drank without tasting it. How much did I make? 8 vials. And how much is that worth? She hesitated. Enough to change your life. He looked down at the gold chip in his palm. 10 years of work. In 1 hour. Do you want to come back? She asked. He looked at her. Then, at the chair. Then, at the glass. He nodded. Yes. But deep down, something darker curled around the base of his ribs. Because now he knew. They could take his memories, they could take his pain, and he would let them. Because he had nothing else left to give. The next time Evan opened his eyes, everything was different. Gone were the clean white rooms, the soft voices, the clinical cold. Now he stood in a tall glass chamber, suspended in the center of something far grander. The light was golden, almost too golden, warm, in a way that made your skin feel admired. His robe was no longer thin silver. It was black, deep, flowing like liquid night. It clung to his frame in elegant folds, designed not to protect, but to present. He was no longer just a subject. He was a display. The room beyond the glass glowed with a quiet decadence. Alien nobles stood behind curved balconies, their eyes like polished stones, their lips hidden behind masks, breathers, fans. They sipped from glowing cups. They murmured without sound. Their language was private, but their meaning was clear. They were not here to cure anyone. They were here to buy. Behind him, a soft hum continued. The silver disc on his chest glowed faintly, slowly drawing from him a steady flow of nectar, a passive drip they called it. No pain, no shock, just the constant harvest of memory at rest. A tall attendant entered and placed a single glowing fruit on a pedestal within his glass enclosure. It wasn't food, it was symbolism. It meant that he had been deemed ripe. Evan did not look at the fruit. He stared straight ahead, trying to keep his breathing slow. Then the door at the far end opened, and everything changed. She entered like gravity followed her. Not Vera, someone else, taller, sharper, dressed in obsidian armor that shimmered with the light of broken stars, her shoulders adorned with crests shaped like wings folded in silence. Her silver-blue hair was pulled back into a single braid that hung like a blade down her spine, and her face, calm, unreadable, carved from cold certainty. Her name passed through the air like an unspoken truth. Lady Jerea Vel, the collector of emotion. A name whispered across the inner worlds, one of the wealthiest, most feared nobles in the trade. She was known to purchase rare sources, not to use them, but to archive them, keep them sealed, preserved. She believed in possession, not experience. She had not attended a live showing in over a decade, and now her eyes were on Evan. The air inside the chamber turned colder. Or maybe his skin did. She stepped forward. The crowd parted without resistance. Jerea approached the glass and stopped inches from him. She pressed one palm to the surface. A scanner blinked. His emotional output spiked instantly. The monitors above him flickered with rising numbers. Attendance shifted. Buyers gasped. But Jerea did not smile. She frowned, then turned her head to Vera, who had just entered, standing proudly near the bidding console. "Is it real?" Jerea asked, her voice like frost sliding across steel. "Completely," Vera replied, confident. "No chemical triggers, no forced memories. His nectar is pure. He was born with it." Jerea stared at Evan again. Too long. Then quietly, she said something that made the whole room flinch. "Too real." Vera tilted her head. "I beg your pardon." "Too real to sell," Jerea said. The words hit like a stone in a glass pool. Vera recovered quickly. "Perhaps the exposure was too fast. We can slow the cycles, modify the drip, filter the emotional spectrum." But Jerea shook her head. "Some feelings are not meant to be owned," she said. "And if I took him, I would feel more than I can bear. That," she added, turning to leave, "is dangerous." She walked away. No one followed, not even the guards. Evan exhaled slowly. He hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. And in that moment, beneath the golden lights and silent awe of the elite, Someone, finally, had looked at him and seen not a product, but a person. Later in his chamber, he sat alone. The robe had been replaced by a softer version. The disc still pulsed, but his thoughts were louder now, too real to own. The words echoed, and they didn't sound like rejection. They sounded like warning. The chamber was dark when it came. No lights, no guards moving. Just the soft, constant hum of the nectar monitor beside Evan's bed. The silver disc on his chest still pulsed quietly, drawing him dry one memory at a time. He sat against the wall, knees pulled to his chest, staring at nothing. His mind should have been empty. It wasn't. The words kept looping, too real to own. He hadn't slept since the auction, not because he was afraid, but because for the first time since arriving at the facility, he wasn't sure what he was becoming. They had cleaned him, polished him, extracted from him, framed him like art. But Jireya, she hadn't looked at him like art. She had looked at him like a warning. A sound broke the silence. A click. Soft, quick, hidden. Evan turned. A small panel at the back of the room, invisible until now, slid open with a sigh. From the black void behind it, a silver sphere the size of a fist rolled forward. It blinked once, blue light, then projected a beam onto the far wall. A hologram bloomed to life. Jireya Vel, her face was uncovered, her expression unreadable. "You don't know what they are doing to you," she said. Evan sat upright, his heart suddenly louder than the machine beside him. "This isn't about credits," she continued. "It never was. You think they're buying your pain, but that's not what they want. They're buying control. Your body produces something they can't replicate. Real human feeling. They harvest it. They sell it. And when your numbers drop, they won't let you leave." Evan whispered, "Why are you helping me?" The projection paused. Then she answered, "Because once, I was like you." A flicker of something in her eyes, shame, memory, maybe both. "I didn't escape," she said, "but I made sure someone else could." The light snapped off, the panel closed, silence returned. But Evan no longer felt like a captive. He felt like a fuse. The lights flickered above him, once, twice, as if the whole room were holding its breath. And he knew he had to get out. The gala was a world made of light. Alien music curled through the air like smoke. Strange, slow tones played on instruments shaped like bones and glass. Beings from across the galaxy wandered beneath golden arches, their clothes glowing, their faces hidden behind masks or breathing veils. Laughter drifted above them, soft and sharp, but it wasn't joy. It was ownership. They had come to see beauty. They had come to buy feeling. And tonight, Evan Dre was their centerpiece. He stood on a raised platform of polished glass, dressed in dark fabric that wrapped his body like a whispered secret. A thin stream of nectar still dripped through the silver disc on his chest, collected into glowing vials below the stage. His eyes were half lowered, his expression neutral, the perfect specimen. But behind the mask of stillness, his heart pounded, because tonight was the night. Hours earlier, a crystal chip had arrived hidden inside his food tray. No words, just a single glyph. He didn't need more. It meant one thing, tonight. The crowd around him shifted, whispers, scans, evaluations. Vera moved between buyers like a conductor, her voice smooth as she spoke to them about Evan, his purity, his yield, his unmatched resonance. "This one," she said, "does not require stimulation. His memory is natural. His sorrow is clean." A collector with gold skin leaned forward. "Does he dream?" "He does," Vera replied, "and the machines record every image." Evan said nothing. He didn't need to, because across the room, he saw her, Jireya Vel. She wore silver armor tonight, masked and silent, blended among the elite. But when their eyes met, she blinked, once, then twice. The signal. A servant drone floated toward him, with a tray holding a glowing fruit. Evan stepped forward as trained, as expected. But beneath the fruit, hidden in a shallow compartment, was a thin data chip. He palmed it, slid it into the receiver in his wrist cuff. His vision flickered. Then it changed. A map, a countdown, directional markers leading to a service lift, emergency codes, timed lighting disruptions. It was a full extraction plan. 10 minutes. He exhaled slowly and waited. Below the stage, Jirea moved. She weaved through servants and musicians, pressing controls hidden in the side walls. Lights shimmered. Security bots paused. The air changed. Evan watched the platform's glass door. It clicked. No one noticed. Not yet. Then the music hit its loudest note. Fire dancers spun beneath the chandeliers. The room burst into golden flame and motion. And Evan moved. He stepped off the platform like he was part of the show. Calm, measured. He took 3 steps into the crowd before a voice shouted, "He's loose." Alarms blared. Lights cracked into red. Security rushed forward. Smoke exploded from the floor. And through the chaos, Jirea appeared beside him. "Now," she hissed, grabbing his wrist. They ran. Side halls, maintenance corridors, narrow turns behind nectar tanks, and dripping machines. The map blinked in Evan's vision, red arrows guiding them left, right, down. "Where are we going?" he asked, breathless. "Emergency lift," she answered. "Stolen ship. Back exit." Behind them, Vera's voice screamed over the comms. "Seal the upper decks. Do not let the human leave this level." They burst through a steel door. The platform waited. A small black ship, engine already humming. Jirea threw him a jacket. "Put this on. You'll blend in at border scans." He hesitated. "What about you?" She glanced back. The gala behind them burned. "My name doesn't matter anymore." They boarded. The ship rose. Below, the pleasure gala collapsed into chaos. Screaming nobles, security drones, crashing chandeliers, broken vials of stolen memory. And above it all, 2 shadows fled into the stars. Evan sat in the back, shaking, not from fear, but from release. He was no longer their product. He was no longer framed in glass. And for the first time since stepping into this world, he was free. The ship drifted through the void like a whispered secret. No signal, no name, just cold hull and stolen silence. Evan sat near the back, wrapped in the too large jacket Jirea had tossed him. His breath fogged the cabin air. His heart hadn't stopped racing. It pulsed against his ribs, like it still thought alarms were screaming somewhere nearby. Jirea sat at the controls, eyes locked on the stars ahead. She hadn't spoken since launch, not a single word, just piloted, steady, focused. Evan watched her in the reflection of the viewport, silver braid, set jaw, a kind of quiet fury no one would dare name. "Where are we going?" he asked finally. "Dead station, near Tovex's outer ring," she said. "Off-grid, no sensors, quiet." "And then what?" "I disappear." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into a hidden panel beside her seat and pulled out a small black case. She set it gently in his lap. "Open it," she said. Inside were vials, tiny glass tubes, glowing faint blue. Evan knew what they were before he asked. "Nectar." "Yours," she said. "From your last sessions. I took them before the gala, before the sale." He stared at the glowing fluid, something that once lived inside him, now bottled like perfume. "And this is what they want so badly." Jirea sat across from him. Her voice dropped low. "Not just that. Your nectar is different, purer, more potent. Not because of your pain, but because of what you are." He frowned. "What do you mean?" She reached into her coat again and handed him a data crystal. "Read it." He slid it into the console port. The screen flickered. Files opened. Subject 7, G human male Earth origin, modified in utero, emotional output 340% above baseline. He stopped reading. His mouth went dry. "This is me," she nodded. "You weren't born ordinary, Evan. You were made. engineered through a covert project funded by off-world buyers. You were grown to produce nectar beyond human capacity, not raised, farmed. He leaned back, hand over his face. His mind spun. Every emotion he'd ever had, was it even his? Or was it programmed? "Why are you helping me?" he asked quietly. Jireya looked away. "Because I helped build it." Evan's stomach turned. "What?" "My family ran one of the early distribution routes. We processed harvests, transported specimens. I grew up believing we were giving humans purpose, that you were tools, designed to feel for us, but it was a lie. And you woke up one day and decided to undo it all." "No," she said. "I woke up too late. The system was already bigger than me, but I could still help one." Evan stared at her. "And you picked me." A sudden beep shattered the silence. Jireya spun toward the console. "Red warning. Tracking signal detected." She cursed under her breath. "They found us." His blood ran cold. "They put a chip in me." "No," she snapped. "It's the ship. They tagged it before launch. A backdoor failsafe." She slammed a sequence into the controls. "Engaging decoy jump, sending false signature west. But we don't have long. You have to go." "Go where?" She opened the hatch to a small escape pod in the rear of the ship. "Just enough for one." "You're not just a runaway anymore, Evan. You're a living vault. Your body holds what they can't recreate. You're the only one who can break the system." He stepped back. "I'm not leaving you." She pressed a glowing crystal into his hand, the same one from earlier. "It has everything. Names, labs, buyers. Burn them all." He shook his head. "You're coming with me." She smiled sadly. "I can't. They're after me too. But you? They fear you more. Because they can't predict you. Because you still feel things no algorithm can control." Tears burned behind his eyes. "You think I'm strong enough to take them down?" "No," she whispered. "I know you are." She pushed him gently into the pod. The hatch sealed. Through the small window, he saw her mouth one word before the launch sequence began. "Live." Then stars swallowed him. The escape pod floated through the abyss like a forgotten prayer. No engine roar, no starfield blur, just silence. The kind that made your thoughts too loud. Evan sat curled against the wall, the crystal Jireya had given him clutched in both hands. It pulsed faintly with internal light, like it breathed. She was gone. She had stayed behind. And now all that remained of her was this. He didn't cry. Not then. He didn't speak. Not until the stars around him shifted and a derelict station came into view. A rusted ring above the gas giant Rovac 6, long abandoned. No sensors, no lights, just quiet steel and dust. A hiding place carved from time. He docked the pod and climbed out. Alone, but not helpless. He got to work. Using the crystal's encrypted files, Evan accessed the old consoles. The data inside was worse than he imagined. Dozens of facilities, hundreds of humans, tanks filled with floating bodies, some awake, some comatose, nectar being harvested in real time and auctioned to the highest bidder. And then he found her, Marin, his sister. Her face flickered across the screen again and again. Listed as a key carrier, her medical records were fake. The money he had sent her, the care he thought she was receiving, had been part of the lie. She had never been sick. She had been stored. He screamed. He punched the console until blood slicked his knuckles. Then he fell to the floor, shaking, broken not from surprise, but from confirmation. He had been trying to save someone who was never free to begin with, and now he knew what he had to do. He uploaded the data to everywhere: pirate networks, dark grid relays, abandoned signal towers across 5 sectors. He recorded a message in every known language. "My name is Evan Dre. I am human. I was engineered for your pleasure. My memories were extracted. My feelings were sold. But I'm done. I have the truth. I have the names, and I will burn your world down with it." The message went viral. Collectors panicked. Labs were evacuated. Markets crashed overnight. But Evan didn't stop. He followed the crystal's coordinates, one lab after another. He breached the first, using Jireya's override codes. Inside, he found rows of nutrient tanks. He shut them all down, freed who he could, burned the rest. At the second facility, he carried out a girl, barely 12, trembling and silent. Her name was Lara. She had been labeled Batch 17. But when she looked at Evan, she whispered something through cracked lips. Subject 7G. He shook his head. No, he said softly. Just Evan. By the time he reached the third lab, offers started coming in. Credits, ships, safe passage, bribes from nobles who wanted their names hidden. He ignored them all. They were still trying to buy what should never have been for sale. And then came the final stop, Earth Orbit Facility 9, the Seed Lab, the place where he had been made, and where Marin still floated in a glass coffin. She hadn't aged, suspended in stasis, her data connected to the master servers that fed hundreds of smaller labs across the galaxy. She was the source code, the prototype. Evan pressed his hand against the glass. I thought I was saving you, he whispered, but I was only keeping you inside the cage. He made a choice. He copied every byte of her data into the last remaining crystal. She didn't wake up, but she didn't need to. He would carry her in every message, every strike, every truth. He stepped back, activated the core burn, and watched the lab go up in flames. A pillar of smoke marked the death of the lie. Above him, the stars did not look brighter, but they looked clearer. He wasn't a product. He wasn't a machine. He wasn't even a man anymore. He was a message. Far above the core worlds, in a palace built from glass and gold, the nobles of the galaxy sat in silence. No music played. No drinks were poured. On the vast holographic screen before them, one image repeated, Evan Dre's face, human, defiant, unshaken. They watched his message for the 5th time. They watched as his voice spread through systems once locked in secrecy. They watched as markets crashed, buyers panicked, and collectors began burning their precious vials like cursed relics. A single ripple had become a wave. A single voice had become a storm. In the shadows of every star, something had broken, and it would not be rebuilt. On a hidden moon station, Evan stood before a crowd of rescued humans and allied species. Over 100 now, some children, some silent, all scarred. They looked at him not like a savior, but like someone who had spoken a truth they'd always known, but never dared to believe. He held the final crystal in his hand. Inside it was Marin, her voice, her mind, her memory. They told me I was made to feel, Evan said softly. Built in a lab, grown for pain, programmed for beauty. But I learned something. He stepped down from the platform and walked among them. I can also fight. The crowd did not cheer. They nodded. They understood. In the weeks that followed, the resistance grew. They didn't raise armies. They raised proof, leaked names, hacked auctions, released footage of nobles laughing over the trembling faces of emotion-farmed humans. The galaxy recoiled. For the first time in generations, shame struck the elite. Jireya's name was cleared. Her private logs were published across every noble court. Her last words became protest banners. You don't fear humans. You fear what they remember. And Evan, he never returned to Earth. He didn't run for power, didn't sit on councils. He moved from place to place, quiet, focused. He trained others to speak, to escape, to carry the truth forward like fire. Years later, in the very dome where he was once displayed like property, a sculpture stood, glass and steel shaped into a human figure, hand raised toward a beam of golden light. No face, no name, only a plaque, to the one who was never for sale. Elsewhere, on a peaceful moon with no ports, no politics, Evan sat beneath a canopy of stars, older now, quieter, but not empty. A child once asked him, "Why don't they sell humans anymore?" And Evan smiled. "Because one of us reminded them," he said. "We were never theirs to own." He closed his eyes, the crystal around his neck glowing faintly. And for the first time, not in pain, not in fire, but in peace, he felt full. Not because he had burned the world, but because he had chosen truth over silence, dignity over comfort, and life over survival.